So 2 years ago, I was involved in a horrendous vehicle accident. I was rear-ended by a drunk truck driver, which was really unpleasant for me because it left me entirely bedridden for 3 months. After that accident, I couldn't move a muscle since everything hurt so much. So, I was pretty broken up. But it didn't seem to matter because my father kicked me out of the house regardless. I was 18 years old at the time, and I had taken the car out to practice for my driver's license test, which was just a few days away. When I got into the accident, I hadn't even driven the car very far. I was in the area when it occurred. I had clearly requested permission from my stepmother because my father had made it plain that I needed to ask at least one parent before taking the car out, in any scenario. So I asked her since my father was at work, and she had told me I may take the car. But afterward she changed the tale to make it appear as if I was going out to see my friends and to look cool. I had taken the car and snuck away without asking her why, and she had chosen to trust her without hearing my side of the story, so she kicked me out. My stepmother had always been strange around me, but I never expected her to lie to my father about anything like this and get me kicked out of the family, since that was simply outrageous. She'd been in my life since I was 4 years old, and my real mother had never been involved. After giving birth to me, she suddenly decided that she no longer wanted to be a mother and signed away her parental rights. She and my father were never married, so it was easier for her to leave, and my father was willing to accept responsibility and raise me on his own, so he didn't question it either. She had never tried to be a part of my life, so I was pleased. My father began seeing my stepmother when I was 4 years old, and they married 3 years later. But by then, I had recognized that my stepmother had no interest in being my mother. She was only my father's wife, nothing more. We didn't get along well as kids, so she frequently avoided me. However, as I grew older, we began to get along less and argued more regularly, even over minor issues. She would push it to extremes and then complain to my father about my bad behavior, and he would always side with her, which was aggravating, because she was the one who instigated the fight with me. We weren't on good terms already, and I was simply glad I was moving away to college in a few months. But it never occurred, and I ended up moving in with my grandparents since my father no longer wanted me. It had nothing to do with money, although my father is quite wealthy. He owns his own paper firm, and in addition, he has medical insurance for the entire family as well as car insurance. So I know it wasn't for money. The only thing that made him kick me out of the house was what my stepmother told me about how the accident happened. She had made up and fed him a ridiculous narrative about how I had planned to go out with my friends and wanted to look cool, so I had taken the car out without her permission. Apparently, she informed him that she learned about it via spying on me, and that she had even warned me not to do such things. However, after hearing that talk, I simply ignored her and went out of my way to do so. This happened after the accident, and the doctors stated I'd be bedridden for a few months until I healed enough to resume normal mobility. So that, combined with the pain of the collision, was enough to give me distress. To make matters worse, my stepmother began fabricating lies about me in order to deceive my father. So after going back and forth for a week about what the reality was, I lost my cool and began yelling at her and calling her a variety of insults. I accused her of lying and said she was just envious because she couldn't have my father all to herself. I also said she was crazy in the head for accusing me of something I hadn't even done, especially considering my situation. I believe that was the final straw for my father, and he chose to relocate me to my grandparents' place, who were gracious enough to accept me. I was outraged that my father was forcing me out of the house while I was in such bad state, and I even told him that the fact that he chose my stepmother over me meant that I would never see him the same way again. And he stated that I apparently needed to be disciplined, and that he couldn't keep hurting his wife simply because I didn't know how to act and wanted to be a brat. So it was clear to me that he had chosen his side and decided to believe my stepmother's version of what had transpired because he didn't trust me. It was sad for me, and I decided never to speak to him again. It was a difficult decision for me to make because we had been together since I was a child. In my mind, my stepmother was never truly a member of my family. She had always been there, but I never thought of her as a member of the family since I'm sure she didn't think of me as one either. However, after my father's choice, I concluded that none of them were deserving of the title of family, as it was a big word with a lot of duties. My father had originally tried to be there for me, which I appreciated, but in the end, he valued my stepmother far more than me. After I moved in with my grandparents, they were the ones who looked after me, even hiring a full-time nurse to aid me. They were great people, and I had always gotten along with them. The only reason I hadn't moved in with them earlier was that I was still hoping my father would change, but he didn't. In any case, that's unfortunate for me. They are excellent folks who cared for me and made me feel loved since they recognized that I was going through a difficult time in my life. They tried to convince my father to come visit me, but he kept making excuses. Sometimes he was too busy, and other times he was exhausted from work. For nearly 2 months, he did not pay me a visit. Even after the accident, Dad kicked me out and relocated me to my grandparents' place. My grandparents eventually got into a confrontation with him because of the way he was behaving, saying it was unfair to me. So my father decided to inform them that he had no intention of reconciling with me anytime soon, because it appeared that my stepmother no longer approved of me and had given him an ultimatum to pick between her or me. And he'd chosen her. And he believed that I should learn to be a better person and get along with others. And until that happened, he couldn't picture us having a connection because he thought I had been a tough child to cope with in recent years, and he couldn't put up with that kind of conduct any longer for his own and his wife's sakes. So that was it. Since then, we haven't spoken. My grandparents were the ones who sent me to college after I recovered, and they have been there for me ever since. 2 years have passed, and I will graduate in 1 year. So I've been trying to move on with my life, which has been challenging, but I have supportive friends and grandparents. So it's easier for me, I suppose. Anyway, I hadn't heard from or about my parents in a few years, and until lately, I had no intention of ever getting back at them or disrupting their life. I was fine without him, but I think my stepmother has significant mental issues because she contacted me last week to inform me that she and my father were renewing their wedding vows in a few weeks, and that she wanted me to attend. I was perplexed as to why she wanted me there, so I immediately wrote back, informing her that I would not be attending. But she said I had to be there because my father was going to contact me in a few days to ask me about it formally. One of the main reasons he wanted me to be there was that several of his business associates were also going to be there, and they knew he had a daughter because they had seen some family photos on his desk. And it would be strange to explain to them why I was missing such an event. And my father had been trying to contact me in order to make amends on the file. Anyway, she encouraged me to simply accept the offer and put everything in the past. However, I was not ready to put everything behind me because it had only been 2 years, and I would never forget how my father had made me feel. So I ignored the message and got on with my day. However, after a few hours of not receiving a response from me, she decided to message me again. And this time she claimed that she had always known I was an ungrateful brat who lacked self-control. And this time I was still attempting to demonstrate how low I could go, especially since my father was trying to make things right with me, even though I didn't deserve it. She then threatened me, telling me that I could either be there or give up any chance of inheriting my father's business or money in the long run. And she claimed she would make sure of it, which irritated me since she thought she could terrify me with those cringe-worthy threats. I ultimately blocked her because she had been getting on my nerves before this. I had just barred them on social media, but I didn't block their phone numbers because it seemed pointless. However, after receiving that message, I banned both of their phone numbers, and I assumed that was the last of it, but even it wasn't sufficient, I suppose. She contacted me via email and stated that I absolutely had to accept the invitation because a renewal of their wedding vows was more than simply an event for them. It was also related to my father's profession, and he wished I could be there. Even so, she could not have been nicer to me, especially because they were the ones who needed me. She continued to threaten me to get her way, and I decided I had had enough. There was no reason for me to run away from these things, so I decided to tackle the matter by making a post and attaching all of the evidence of our previous chats. I also wrote about everything that had happened in the past and determined to confront her and my father on social media. I made it a public post, tagging my father and stepmother, as well as a couple of his co-workers whose names and social media profiles I recognized. That was a purposeful move because I wanted his work, friends, and business associates to know what he had done to me in the past, especially because my stepmother had made it clear to me that the renewal of their wedding vows would also be a business event for them. After posting, I didn't anticipate anything to happen. But then, a day later, I learned from my grandparents that my father was distraught, since what I had done had resulted in a significant loss for them. They were planning a merger with an office supply company in a few months, and it was still in the early stages, but it was likely to be called off due to my post. It was going to be a major deal for his firm, but because I had named specific people in my post, news spread about what had happened to me, and my father's reputation certainly suffered because he did not come across well in that post. So now the merger is in question because my father has been unable to get a response from anyone who was working with him so far, and he believes that it was because of the post that I had made my grandparents think that what I did was probably not that good, and there was no reason for me to involve my father in all of this, since it was my stepmother went out of her way to be mean to me. And now I feel guilty as well. So thank you, Aita, for publicly calling out my father and stepmother. Update 1. Hi. So it's been a few days after my original post, and I've chosen to remove my post attacking my parents. Also, some of you have asked me why I referred to my father and stepmother as my parents when it is evident that I do not get along with any of them. Wow. My father is obviously my biological parent, and while I don't much like my stepmother, I've known her since I was a youngster, so I've grown accustomed to referring to them as parents. I don't know how else to express it either. It's not that serious, so no big problem. Anyway, back to what I did. I removed the post and unblocked my father so that I could contact him. Most people in the comment area believe I do not owe anyone an apology, but I felt I could at least explain that I did not intend for something so horrible to happen, because I had no knowledge about the merger and how significant it may have been for his company. I didn't exactly apologize. I just kind of explained myself and told him that everything that happened 2 years ago was still with me, and I hadn't been able to completely move on from it. So I learned he was going to invite me to an event and try to make apologies with me, but only because he wanted to appear normal in front of his business associates. That was simply hurtful, and my stepmother's behavior toward me had been highly insulting, which irritated me. These why I created the post, so I put everything in one text and sent it to him. I didn't expect him to respond because I knew he'd be furious over whatever had happened, but then he replied simply saying that everything was good. He earned it after what he'd done, and he didn't blame me for how I reacted. That was a strange reaction, so I decided to talk to my grandparents about it, hoping that they would know why he was acting strangely, because I had expected him to be angry and chastise me for what I had done, but nothing had happened. So when I approached my grandparents about this, they informed me that he had been regretting his actions for a long time, and it all came to a head when I posted that. They stated they had recently discussed similar issues with my father before I wrote him the text, and he had indicated how much he regretted putting me out. It had been his unilateral decision to do so, but he said that he was just perplexed about what to do. My stepmother always made it sound very convincing when she told him about how bratty and awful my behavior was, and he had bought it, but then he started doubting himself, and no matter what my stepmother told him a couple of weeks after he had kicked me out, he had never been able to gather the courage to make things right with me, and he knew he deserved it, which is why he did not try to retaliate or even argue with me when I sent him the text. They also told me that he sincerely intended to invite me to the renewal of his wedding vows, not only to impress his business associates, as my stepmother had said. In fact, his business associates were not invited to the occasion. He had no idea why she would say such a thing given how close and intimate the situation was. Most likely, it was done to sever my relationship with my father. I never understood her motives, but he had seen the screenshots I had shared and realized that my stepmother was prone to lying, and they had also hit a tough time. He hadn't heard back from the men he was supposed to merge with yet, so he's guessing the merger has been canceled and he'll receive a formal email or something later. But for the time being, his personal life is in chaos, and he's attempting to deal with it. Now that I've had that conversation with my grandparents, I'm not sure how I feel. They told me that they were proud of me for doing the right thing and reaching out to him, even if it wasn't to apologize. Because even my grandparents don't believe that apology is necessary in this scenario, because there was some misunderstanding caused by my stepmother, and I'd simply reacted like any other person in my situation, but at least I had the courtesy to reach out to him and try to make things right with him, so they appreciate it. However, I'm at a loss for words about my father's and my current circumstances. Things have been pretty bad between us for the past 2 years, and while I wasn't in contact with him, I found it easier to deal with my feelings. But now, I'm simply not sure how I feel about it all. Update 2. So many of the comments on my previous update advised me not to contact my father again and to simply stay. I have no touch with him. I don't know about you, but I don't think that's the best way to proceed. Anyway, I've already broken the no contact rule by contacting him following that post, so I don't think I can just go back. I still have a lot of unresolved concerns and unanswered questions. I don't think I can go back to no touch with him so quickly. Maybe after at least one conversation with him to obtain the closure I need or whatever. Perhaps after that. But until that happens, I don't think what you're recommending is really possible for me. I don't mind if you call me weak or stupid. I know what my heart desires and what's best for me. So trust me, I've got this. Anyway, I told my grandparents about how I was feeling and suggested that we sit down and talk, and they said they felt that would be a good idea as well, and that they are in the process of speaking with my father and setting up a meeting for us. According to what I know, things aren't going well between him and my stepmother, and they may be getting divorced. I'm not sure yet, but that would be very humorous if that happened, because they were about to repeat their vows, and now that won't happen. Instead, they might wind up parting. Talk about irony. But, according to what my grandparents told me, they have been in contact with my father and are attempting to re-establish their relationship with their son because my grandparents do not have as much time ahead of them as I do. They have limited time and need to make the most of it, so I understand why they want to make things right with him. Furthermore, it appears to me that my father is sincerely contrite for everything that has occurred in the past, as my grandparents informed me that he has been distraught and does not seem to care about the merger failing. All he talks about is how he messed up as a father and failed me. And I guess I get where he's coming from. I don't think I've ever tried to see things from his perspective. My grandparents have told me that they would speak with him and let me know when we may meet, and I just hope that everything goes well. Update 3. Hello. So, 2 days ago, I finally met my father after 2 years of not communicating with him. We met in my grandparents' house, and it was really emotional. I still can't believe I was finally able to sit down with him and talk about everything that had been upsetting me, as well as get answers to the issues I had been thinking about for so long. He began by apologizing to me for what he had put me through, and saying that he knew that he had failed as a father and did not even deserve to be sitting in the same room with me because I had turned out to be a better person than he had ever imagined, and he had no role to play in any of it, which I don't think is true, to be honest. He raised me almost entirely on his own because my stepmother avoided me when I was younger. Our connection only deteriorated as I grew older, and everything fell apart with my stepmother, but before that, he had always been a wonderful father to me. But in any case, he admitted that he had made numerous mistakes, the most serious of which was trusting my stepmother over me. He added that he assumed she was telling the truth since she was older, and that he never expected her to lie to him because she was so good at manipulating him when they were just the two of them. And I must admit that she was a smooth talker. He told me that he had been duped, and he was completely perplexed about who was telling the truth and who to trust. That he ended up making the wrong decision. And even after he began to doubt himself, he lacked the confidence to own his mistakes and speak with me. And that is why he did not contact me after kicking me out of the house. He stated that he sincerely apologized for everything, and it was now up to me to accept his apology and work on our relationship or not. He informed me that even if I opted not to forgive him and continued to have no contact with him, he would be fine with it, since he understood he had made a huge mistake and had to be okay with whatever I decided. I also learnt from him that Dad and my stepmother were getting divorced, and she had already left the house. After seeing the screenshots proving that she had lied to me about why he wanted to invite me to the vow renewal, he confronted me about what she had told me, resulting in a heated argument. She admitted to everything, even lying 2 years ago about what happened with the automobile and why I was in that accident. After that, there was no way he could stay with her. So he asked her to leave and then filed for divorce. It was difficult for me to make a decision right then and there, so I told him I'd need some time to think about it. Right now, it is what I am doing. I'm trying to establish myself and decide whether I should give him another chance. I know most people would say I shouldn't, But he is my father, and only I can make the proper decision. Besides, I'm an adult now, so I don't need to rely on him for anything. He doesn't need to rely on me either. After I graduate from college, I plan to get my own job and become financially independent. So it is entirely out of the question here. Just in case someone wanted to accuse him of attempting to make things right with me, or that he wanted to be able to rely on me once he retired, as that appears to be a prevalent argument here. I don't think that will be the case because his business is doing well. Whether or not the merger occurred, his reputation suffered, but his numbers and sales did not. So I believe that speaks for itself. The father and daughter have a totally emotional relationship, and now I must determine if I want to work on that relationship or not. I'm leaning toward yes, since he is the only parent I've ever had, and while the last few years have been difficult, I can't let that detract from everything he has done well. But I'm not sure yet, which is why I'm publishing it here to see what others think. I really want to put things right and have a regular family, and this is my only chance. Please keep that in mind before making any comments, as I sincerely want things to work out. Update 4. So I decided to try to work on my connection with my father. We're starting therapy together next week. I hope everything works out for us. We'll also try to restore our friendship by talking to each other and communicating more often. My grandparents are overjoyed, and I honestly believe it will brighten our future. I'm truly ready to leave everything in the past and move on. Stay tuned for more stories from our travels, relationships,